See, I was just saying just now, this is the great thing about following up from a musician. It's about that everyone else leaves. So I could just say whatever I want at this point, and maybe it's set regardless.
Yeah.
Although, Donald, you might need to, that rent-a-crowd thing we were talking about before, you might need to, I'm going to have to, I'll pay you later. I promise that will happen.
I'll be pleased to hear your new poems anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to read a couple from my first book today, which is published by the lovely Dempsey Windloader here. It's only going to be a couple for me because I do want this to kind of focus on new material mostly, but I would like to at least go for a couple of classics, I suppose, anyway, just so there's a reason for having me here in the first place. So I figured I'd start out by reading the poem, which is essentially the only reason why anyone knows I exist at all, which is titled 11 Years of May. This one I was lucky enough to place top 10 in the UK National Poetry Competition with. So very, very grateful for that. And again, it's the only reason that anyone invites me to anything at all. So this poem's obviously going to be quite important to me for, hopefully, the remainder of my writing career. So this is 11 Years of May. A feed of it A pertains a gherkin. I was cross-legged on the floor, bordering on 5 years old, when death was just a thing that grown-ups did, like holidays or weddings. We ate dinner in Sudoku silence, savouring the council house delight of fish and chips wrapped in the metro, and my father's entree, his pungent batter sticks, appeared to captivate me. You always want what you can't have, he said. You won't appreciate it. I whined until he caved, and the ascetic fire sent me rolling to the floor, scratching at my tongue while everybody laughed. No one could blame them. At dawn, Mother smiled from the door as I split branches with my brother in the garden. 20 years between us, and we still pretended these were swords, that we were gladiators. A feed of it B pertains to suicide. I was cross-legged on the floor, bordering on 6 years old, with plastic bricks and model trains to normalize my isolation, the way you let a new fish float for 15 minutes prior to release. Knock. My mother rose, crossword left unfinished, and spoke quietly with men in lime green jackets. The house turned sepia that day. My recollection is in Kodachrome. Your brother always loved you, she said. He loved all of us, always, but not himself, because he did drugs. Colin. Named so because the midwife asked what they were calling him. That's my mother's sense of humour. A feed of it C pertains a haunting. The lights came at the foot of summer's door. They'd manifest in droves, patchy frames of green and yellow, irregularly red, phantom jigsaw pieces blinking on and off. They outran me in the hallway, slipped away when I tore through the living room with airplane arms, emptying my lungs. Look out, it's Colin's ghost, as my mother wept into her hands. Ghosts exist when you're a child. They mean that no one has to leave if you don't want them to. I knew Colin was dying when the lights became ephemeral. For a time I could still summon them. With only a moment's breakdown, they would swarm like butterflies on bitter honey, because a child's pain is easier to digest and a single tear is far more tragic than a torrent. I knew that he was dead when the lights had bled me dry, when they refused to answer to an empty howl when I was 17. Thank you. So this next one here is another family-based poem. It's called Keep It in the Family. So families obviously are a really powerful kind of overriding theme throughout the collection. And this next one is actually the first poem that I ever had published, which is a fairly short one, but just for that reason alone I consider it quite important to me on some level. So this is The Blue Envelope. He does this every year, another hallmark staple to add to the collection, 2 months late and swollen with full name formalities. Sincerest apologies for delays in posting this, like it's a letter to the courts and not a misguided plea for forgiveness or perhaps acceptance. And all this for a shitty card with an 11-digit signature. It surprises me, as I get older, how easily Dad became Chris and Chris became him. Thank you. going to read one more from this collection now before I move on to some new material, which is the reason I'm here today. So, at one point when I was living in university, I was actually engaged, as surprising as that sounds. I was engaged to someone who I only occasionally loved. And this poem is about the moment when that realization kind of kicks in and you take a step back and think, why actually am I doing this? Why am I moving in this direction? So this poem is called Meadow Song. We took a day away from city life to drown ourselves in protest. A winding trail by the old mill gave us shelter down a Hampshire mile, where the countryside hummed cricket songs and damsels coupled in mid-flight at waterside, intoxicated by the summer's hiding place, a church for godless folk and tweedy painters. This picture goes out to the westward guest, a trendy little thing. First to say, I love you, and expect the phrase to be returned. I blink, and she's still here. We're standing at the altar, covering our ears, disregarding our abrasions in the hopes they won't turn septic, deliberating over what to name our dogs. I blink twice, and she is gone. My fingers tingle between 2 and 4, thin survivors severed from the burden of a handheld promise in a broken glass ring that looks the same today. A trophy from the war we watched on television, slumped across the sofa, padding out our runtime. I look back and think, we could have shared a life together. I take stock, and I remember that we could have died alone. Thank you. So a bit of an intermission piece. I'm going to do something that I wouldn't normally do. I've never actually done this before, so this will be a really fun experience, one way or another. Either it'll be a complete disaster or it'll be something I do regularly from now on. I'm going to read someone else's poem, actually. This is by the great Michael Hoffman, German-based poet, incredibly influential to my own style, my own writing, and my own decision to get into poetry in the first place, really, because he showed me that poetry was something that didn't need to be a chore. It could be enjoyed, and it had an inherent value in the structure. His work is amazing. I would absolutely recommend checking him out. This is probably a contender for my favourite poem ever, which is difficult to say, because someone says, what's your favourite song ever? And immediately 10 or 15 different songs come into your mind, but this would be a very strong contender. This is Fine Adjustments. By now, it is almost my father's arm, a man's arm, that lifts the cigarettes to my mouth, numbed by smoke and raw onions and chocolate milk. I need calm, something to tranquilize me, after the sudden storm between us that left me shaking and with sticky palms. It only happens here, where I blurt out in German, dissatisfied and unproficient amid the material exhilaration of abstract furniture, a new car on the Autobahn, electric pylons walking through the erasures in the Bayerischer Wald. Once before, I left some lines of Joseph Roth bleeding on your desk. I had no father, that is, I never knew my father, but Zipper had one. That made my friend seem quite privileged, as though he had a parrot or a St. Bernard. All at once, my nature as a child hits me. I was a moving particle, like the skidding lights in a film still, provoking and of no account. I kept up a constant rearguard action, jibing, commenting, sermonizing. Why did God give me a voice, I asked, if you always keep the radio on? It was a fugitive childhood. Aged 4, I was chased round and round the table by my father, who fell and broke the arm he was going to raise against me. Thank you. Absolutely amazing collection, absolutely stunning. I would, by any account, recommend this. Right, so I'm going to read some new material now. Some of these I have read before. None of these have as yet been published, as I'm very much in kind of the mid stages of working on new material right now. So none of these have appeared in print, some of these have been performed before. Let's start working through them. So this first poem is inspired by someone who I used to work with, who was hired for very cynical reasons. This first poem is called One-Eyed Watchman. Simon with the ponytail heard he fell foul of a parachute dive. Daisy with the freckles heard he lost it in the Falklands. He gets around just fine. It might even add character. He's very boring, actually. He collects expired train tickets and wonders why his family won't return his calls. No one doubts his capability. He lives beside his monitors, keeping a close eye on things, or at least most of the things. The odd one might slip through, but surely no one misbehaves. The thieves would just feel guilty if they lacked a proper challenge. He was there for the inspection, and he knew better than to ask about the photographs they took. When his face miraculously sprung up in the local papers, 3 weeks down the line, he saw himself, another man, a flicker on his Twitter feed. One-eyed watchman doesn't let his disability define him. Thank you. So something that's quite important to me, not just as a writer, but just in general, a concept that I hold quite dear to my heart, is this idea of being able to find, maybe not beauty, but value in things that are conventionally seen as unbeautiful or unnoteworthy. Because you can find an endless foray of poems about mountaintops and snow and stars, but these are things that everyone knows have value. I prefer to focus on smaller things. So with that in mind, this next poem is called A Beetle. Disgusting, artless creature, aesthetically and functionally useless, the embodiment of entropy and brutal in its biological desires, now inverted, twitching and convulsing on the edge of platform 3. I watched it strain and lurch and twist against the pavement. Tonight, its primitive design, tested against bombs and poison, would prove to be the nails pinning it before its executioners, the drunks and tired salesmen departing from the midnight train. My back towards the window, discreetly as I could, I tapped once, twice, my toe against its shell, until the creature fell onto its feet, reordered its axes, and sped off, away from our aloof machines. It was just a bug, one of a billion. But character is what you are in the dark, and in the darkness, they know light, an ancient sanctitude that still eludes us, in our higher state of uniform, methodical refrain. Thank you. And this next one was one that was kind of written on the spot, actually, not today, but some time ago. We had an unusual weather phenomenon in our area, which I'll get into in the course of the poem. But I remember waking up that day and walking outside, and it really was as if the apocalypse had happened very quietly, and no one felt the need to tell me until I woke up that morning and went out to get the bread. So I very much felt the need to respond to that. And this next poem would be as a result. So this is called It's in the Air. I think the world decided it was time to take a dive. Our high street was a dead land, people drowning in their iPods. Perhaps it was beyond repair. And so, the sky solidified, fossilized into a limestone wall, and left us with an anesthetic smell, something between cinnamon and death, an empty plague evoking visions of a nightmare, of an English New Orleans, packing up our suitcases with clothes and tinned baked beans. Did the missiles fall, and no one told me? Did the neurotoxins in our water just lobotomize me without asking? Did the eternal dread of living poor, of being stupid, lonely and afraid rise up, larger than a tidal wave, fixed to terminate the old illusion? My barista had ideas of his own. It's sand from the Sahara Desert. You can't see it, but it's in the air. Then he continued his debate of the classification of gingerbread. Is it a cookie or is it a cake? These are the pressing questions. While the couple in the corner, grey as dying mice, talked up a storm, the power of a storm, how helpless we are in the face of nature's patient, quiet fury. Thank you. And this is one that, again, was completely kind of on the spot in response to an unusual day out that I had a couple of weeks ago. So this one is called Any Old Time. I roll on down to Orpington spontaneously for the vintage market. What else am I supposed to do? My colleagues are in World Cup heat, and I can't even pretend to care. The sun is punishing, but fair. My tea is only mildly grotesque, and I just had my picture taken by an admittedly anachronistic yellow three-wheeled van. The old couples are dancing like tarantulas on ice skates in a swing of arty shore, and they're not sure what they remember, but they just remember that it was good. And the ladies are all pretty in their polka dot blue dresses, their dark green military sets, their red lipstick and sailor shirts. I'm a simple man at heart. And across the replica guard station, time-skipped banners spread a morbid gospel, declaring Hitler will send no warning, quaint reminders of a day when Hitler was the most evil person ever. They paint a cartoon landscape, but I'm more than willing to accept a Disney adaptation of strange history. Appreciating saxophones is not endorsing the return of slavery. Thank you. I'm going to do two more, I think, a slightly shorter one and then a longer one. I've gone quite into speculative fiction recently, both in poetry and in prose. I just find there's something quite cathartic about being able to imagine scenarios that hold kind of some sort of thematic significance and then painting them as if they were real. And that's something I've been experimenting a bit with in my poetry, because you don't tend to see that very often, so I wanted to see how it would work. And this next one is called Livestream. I got the news that Michelle would be streaming her own suicide. She announced it on her website, set a time and date for the event, and left the web page open to save effort on the day. A timer has been counting down since February. It now says 7 hours, 16 minutes. I wonder what she's doing now. There must be a lot of preparation. You have to get the lighting right and count the pills ahead of time. You only get one day of filming. There's no room for post-production. In 7 hours, I will be asleep. But honestly, I hope it all goes well. I'll watch the archive in a few days' time. She's worked hard to get this far, and her subscriber count is higher than it's ever been before. And this last one was, it's funny, coming off of the heels of a first book, there is always that fear that you're going to end up pigeonholing yourself. And I don't want to be known for the rest of my writing life as the bitter young man who writes about his family. I don't want to be known as that, because you see a lot of people who just bleat endlessly about the same subjects over and over and over again, and that's not me, that's not who I want to be. So for this next poem I've written is kind of an epilogue to my first book, a way of putting that to rest and moving on from it. This one is going to be called The Fine Day. It was a picture from a movie when Christopher went up in flames. All his closest friends were there, though neither were on time, and his pension money paid for the most simple service possible, coffin closed in Putney Vale, riding on a spark. 3 months he waited, silent as a hornet, steady as a pyroclastic dome. I took the roundabout way home, wrapped in distance and guitars, as dead leaves tangled in the wind and summer peeked through autumn's dressing gown. I smiled, somewhat. And the young lady with the pugs, their eyes like flying saucers, paws like leather lily pads, she smiled too. There was Wi-Fi on the train, a symphonic air conditioner, and Mr. Backwards' baseball cap wrote poetry across from me. Something about watercress, something about coffee beans. I bought a steak and Stilton pasty without looking at the price first, and every set of crossing paths turned green for my departure. And as I stood before that house, I knew the past was ending for me. A quarter orbital rotation settled, done, splintered in a heartbeat, in an echo, in a cheapo immolation. After Dad went up in flames, I called him Dad again, and everything was fine.
Yes.
Thank you. I believe that's all the time I have tonight. So thank you for the people who did come out. I know it's been a busy day, and that's the problem with always following on after a musician, is it's scared everyone leaves to go see the musician. But it's going to happen sooner or later. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of the day.